And our next speaker will be Sølren Frandsen, who comes from Denmark and is a Prorector of Aarhus University in Denmark. Before this appointment, you worked as the Research Director and Director General at the Institute of Food and Resource Economics at Royal Veterinary and Agricultural University, University of Copenhagen. And you've been a member of a lot of ministerial committees as well, and attended national processes. But welcome, please tell about your experiences.
Thank you. Okay, first of all, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for being invited. The theme of the conference, as we've already heard, is challenging and inspiring, and I've really been looking forward to telling you the Danish case. And from a Danish perspective, and in particular the experience we've had at Aarhus University over the last 10 years, I will, by way of examples, address the two central questions which Peter has already told us, namely, what are the factors for success, and which particular questions should Finland keep in mind. And I think my presentation will be way of an example, and I think it supplements very well the previous excellent speakers. But bear with me, there will be a few boring Danish details, but I can tell you the devil's eye in the details when we are dealing with changes in the university sector, in our higher education sector. So I prepared 20 slides. I'll give them away afterwards, and I've also written down what I want to say, so if it's a little too heavy, you can read it afterwards. A talk of around 30 minutes, and I'll try to limit myself to that. Then it's probably this one, is that right? Yes. The outline of my presentation will first be a very short introduction to Aarhus University. It will be short. Where I, for the last 6 years, has served as Prorector, and in particular being responsible for and involved in the merger and strategy processes that has taken place at Aarhus University in that period. I've also in particular been involved in knowledge exchange and in collaboration and in developing new models for collaborating with industry and society. Then this will be followed by a short presentation of Denmark's present international position in terms of international rankings and research impact, what some has called the Danish wonder. I'm not doing it, but some people do. Followed by a short presentation of the development of the Danish higher educational system in the last 20 years, a development that has led to the present situation. I will afterwards present the transformation at Aarhus University as an example, what we have undergone since the consolidation process in the Danish higher education system. I'll conclude by giving a few lessons learned and pose 3 questions that should be kept in mind in our endeavors to improve our higher education system, and point out a few important balances in the design of a successful higher education system. Aarhus University was founded in 1928, only 86 years old today. That is a relatively young university. The university has developed from being a small and respected regional university to a relatively strong international one, ranked like Helsinki University among the top 100 universities in the world. And I have similar comments, rankings, yes, plenty of problems, but when we are in top 100, we love that number. The key numbers are shown in the slide, and I'll not go through them, read them and see them. And should you only remember one number, it should probably be 25, a number not on the slide, as Aarhus University actually counts for approximately 25% of the Danish university sector in terms of students, funding, etc. Now, internationally, some addresses Denmark as a wonder in terms of its success and quick development during the last 10 to 20 years, now being among the European countries with the highest scientific impact. Here illustrated as the country's relative international impact, 100 being the world average, with both Finland and Denmark above the average and ranked among the best countries in the world. Denmark has undergone a quite unique development from average to being among the leading European research nations, as comparable countries in the same period has experienced constant or lower performance. This is illustrated in the coming slide. This slide namely illustrates this development over the last 30 years. As you can see, the present situation has not always been the case. The graph shows 20 years of continued growth, a development that research point out as being a result of a number of individual initiatives pointing in the same direction, stimulating high quality research, stimulating excellence and research impact. In the period many years before 1993, Denmark experienced increased research investments, increased institutionalization of the sector. That's the period where the Danish Research Council system was established. And the funding of strategic research was increasing, i.e. a number of strategic programs were initiated. This was in the following 7 years, from 93 to year 2000, followed by initiatives where research was seen as defined as an autonomous policy area. That is, the new research ministry was founded, a national research strategy was decided, and investments in strategic research continued to be significant. Overall, these 20 years of growth was characterized by increased university funding, a better balance between basic and strategic research, increased, and I think this is important for the Danish case story, a formalization of the PhD education. Before it was apprenticeship, now it's schools. And not to forget that the National Research Foundation was established in 1991. All quite important components to explain the development. Now the details. After 10 to 15 years of stability in funding and framework, a number of significant reforms or new initiatives in the period of 2000 to 2010 has shaped the present higher education system in Denmark. The reforms include a massive increase in volume of PhD students, significant increases in public and private research funding, and of course the new University Act, you can see it here in 2003, the globalization strategy, and the mergers was decided. The first one targeting the issue of governance, the second funding and intake of students and PhD students, and second, that is the mergers, the issue of consolidation. All three important aspects of a higher educational system. It was a period of massive investments due to the Barcelona goals and the globalization strategy, where research was and still is seen as a driver for growth. At the same time, emphasis was also on the road from research to business. Cooperation and commercialization came into focus with impacts on university organization and our tasks. Those 10 years were all called, I think we can call the golden age for research policy in Denmark. Denmark moved from being a careful and pragmatic country in research policy reform to a country with the most far-reaching reforms and the highest range of change. Here I should maybe add, relative to Samil, yes, this was very, courage, a lot of courage, and we'll have to see whether it was smart or not. The overall change in research fundings was both a significant growth and a shift from basic funds to competitive funding, from free research to strategic research, and from small to large appropriations of projects. Finally, this year, another reform, the Innovation Fund Denmark has been established, a merger of 3 existing research councils, which has led to a relatively simple overall research council system in Denmark, with 3 independent units. The Danish National Research Foundation, think that of Centers of Excellence. The Danish Council for Independent Research, think of that of researchers' own initiatives, quality, internationalization. And finally, the the Innovation Fund Denmark, focusing on transferring science to market, the issue of the Death Valley between science and commercialization, which in an approach that resembles very much the EU thinking on technology readiness levels. So 3 independent units. Now I'll focus a little bit on governance and the important act that was voted or decided in 2003. The purpose of the University Act was to strengthen university leadership and management and to clarify universities' societal obligations combined with increased autonomy. The Act addresses 5 components, namely autonomy, as you can see, accountability, governing boards, appointed leaders, and advisory academic councils. Let me add that the board is given the importance of role of control of the senior management team, budget and finance, strategy, and involvement of staff and co-determination. And of course also a bit the links to society. And here I would probably also add, as this is not the case as I understand it in Finland, we have appointed leaders at all leadership levels at the university, from the rector, prorector and university director, to deans and pro-deans and head of departments. Any one of them are none of them are any longer elected by staff, but selected by those above. The Act was then actually adjusted in 2011, which was a response to the international evaluation that took place in 2009. Peter was a member of the committee, so we are to blame him, of course, and its recommendations. And I think also the Act was a response to the debate among and critic about academia of the 2003 Act and the experiences from the consolidation process that had taken place since 2007. At the bottom of the slide, you can see that overall the two acts did give the university more autonomy, but also a number of initiatives, so to speak, to guide the universities. And you know some of them: accreditation, ministerial approval, contracts, financial agreements, etc. But overall, it is the impression more autonomy, but also accountability. Now let's go to the consolidation. Now we had the governance, now we go to the consolidation. I should maybe here add, I forgot a little bit, the Globalization Act was a matter of a lot more money to universities, a lot more students and PhD students, so I will not dwell more with that. But the consolidation process, the mergers. The process itself is worth a story. Salmi just touched upon it. However, here I'll limit myself to the result of the process, namely a consolidation from 25 research universities and government research institutes to 11, 8 universities and 3 remaining applied institutes. As compared to the Finnish status, I guess we can say that this is relatively few research institutions per capita. I think it's less than half. For Aarhus University, this involved the merger between the old Aarhus University, Aarhus School of Business, Danish Institute of Agricultural Sciences, National Environmental Research Institute, University of Education. So 5 very different units merged overnight. And that actually led to an enlargement of the university of more than 40%. That is quite. And all the institutions were quite different in terms of cultures, research focus, educational program, and advisory tasks. And again in 2012, we had the next merger, namely with the Engineering College of Aarhus, however, a much smaller merger at that time. But why did the Danish government, initiate this process? First, and some of the previous speakers addressed it, there was a strong international impulses for change. The importance of growth and innovation policies in a globalizing knowledge economy, as well as the Danish research environment was by OECD deemed too fragmented. Secondly, high government ambitions with a lot of ideas of what should come out of the mergers in terms of degree programs, interdisciplinary cooperation, more EU research funding, higher quality, better collaboration with society and industry. And what made it possible? Actually, I think there was a common understanding in Denmark of an accumulated need after the reforms, for reforms since the 80s and the 90s, which has been a very relatively quiet period. Also a common understood need for increased interaction between research and society, as well, and I think that's very important, an increased global competition. Sometimes we say it very simply, it's a meat market out there, it's competition for talent, it's competition for money. Let's turn to what happened at Aarhus University. The government took decisions. There was this so-called voluntary process. The university merged. So the government took the decisions, and then it was up to the different institutions to implement the decisions. Where I guess Aarhus University was the university with the largest merger and probably the most complicated of them all. The mergers and societal expectations were the drivers or the burning platforms for the EU process. that was initiated after the decisions. There was broad agreement that after the mergers, the status quo was not an option. These burning platforms were necessary to drive the transformation initiatives into the university, where things at the time were considered to be going quite well. Good results, high level of funding. We at the senior management team had a clear understanding that if we did not have this burning platform, it would be very difficult for the university community to become sensitive to the need for further changes. The words on the slide illustrate some of the rhetoric from the time, and it's actually still driving our strategy and the consolidation of our strategies, and need to strengthen excellence and to unify excellence in core disciplines with interdisciplinary research and education, by the way. And societal expectations were and are still quite high. University contribution to solving grand challenges and knowledge transfers to business and society. The next slide is just to illustrate the process overall, from the mergers in 2007 to an intern consolidation from 9 faculties and 55 departments to only 4 faculties and 27 departments. On paper it looks just like that. It's not. I can tell you. And I will not read it all, but the change process involved 4 components, 4 separate components, but of course being linked, namely decisions to establish a new academic organization, a new government structure, a new organization of administration and financing model, and a strengthened empowerment structure. And the need for empowerment structure and all that is extremely important. We did a lot on it, and the next slide will show you that. But as I'll also demonstrate to you later, it was seemingly not enough. Just to demonstrate, quite a number of initiatives was begun to establish the necessary checks and balances, both with stakeholders outside the university, as you can see, but even more importantly, a number of fora and academic council, all established as a formal structure to allow staff and students to be heard and effectively influence the decision-making process within the university. This is also illustrated in the following slides, giving you an idea of the quite extensive and necessary process that took place after EU decisions. And as you will see later, as I just said, this was not sufficient to satisfy all members of staff and students. This slide is just to give you an impression of the process from board decisions to papers, discussions, working groups, and meetings, with new deans taking office early 2011, appointed to lead and develop further the implementation of a number of decisions, and not to mention new practices. The implementation and further development continued in the next 2 years, including deciding new academic initiatives and developing a new and common strategy that was finally adopted in March 2013. In conclusion, after 6 years since the merger, it was now time to focus on execution. As we say in a popular way, it's all about execution. Easy to draw the new diagrams. It's very hard to do in practice. Moving forward according to the original vision and the strategy, and of course to adjust where necessary. This task was given to the new rector that was appointed at the same board meeting where we were approving the consolidated strategy towards 2020. The rector was recruited inside and being a member of that time existing senior management team. This slide then describes what happened after. The rector was appointed in March, stepping in 5 months later, followed by a month of dialogue with staff and students. Thereafter, the new rector established an expert panel under the impression of a certain level of frustration and feeling of lack of effective involvement among parts of staff and students. The panel was to undertake an internal problem analysis to describe the remaining issues to be addressed. And this slide summarizes the core of the critique, proposed solutions and decision taken. And this is absolutely right out of the sessions. It's very, very few weeks old. First column shows you the 4 themes the problem analysis pointed out. Too much centralization and lack of management presence. A feeling of an insufficient involvement and participation of staff and students in decision-making processes. A need for looking at the academic organization. And finally, too much centralization and standardization of administrative support. I'm sure some of you know very well these themes as the need for continued discussions of such matters at universities. But I think the 4 issues here are worth noting when we are changing the system. Second column contains the suggested solution as proposed by the expert panel, from delegation of power and responsibilities to improve practices, strengthen communication and reorganizing parts of the academic administration organization, and increased flexibility and dialogue, in particular at the local level. The third column shows the decisions just a few weeks back taken by the new senior management team. The overall strategy, academic and empowerment structure were all confirmed, now supplemented by strengthened delegation of power, improved practices with respect to flexibility and influence at local level. The department structure were to be reviewed again, in particular at the arts faculty. And finally, a major overhaul of the administration. A different administrative complexity was decided, also with elements of important symbolic initiatives to satisfy the university academic community. Stepping back, stepping back, looking at our experiences. Mergers are not at all easy to implement. They are costly, but might be necessary for a number of reasons, and Salmi gave us a few of them and the previous speakers, as well as I'll come back to some of them in my concluding slides and words. To summarize a few of our experiences, and there are too many to mention here. Actually, I have dozens of anecdotes, maybe over dinner tonight. But the following 2 slides is what I want to publish to give you a few headlines and indications of what to consider prior and during merger processes. First of all, and I think some of our previous speakers told us this, a clear vision is absolutely instrumental. You need to have a clear strategic forward-looking vision and an aim to achieve much more that could be done by each of them. And academic issues has to be at the heart of the merger. That relates to the last point on the slide, namely efficiency and rationalization are rarely good arguments for such exercises. Mergers are also an opportunity for necessary changes in administration, in a lot of the things that has to continue be changed at universities. But that is new government structures, administration and financial aspects, etc. So when you're in a big merger, it actually opens opportunity for other things. Co-location I will not dwell with, and of course, and this is one of the ones that really created debate, strengthened corporate brand and considered abolishing sub-brands. This was controversial. And the reason this was decided and we tried it was we know that all speakers have touched upon it. There is a growing significance of name recognition linked to identity, differentiation, prospective student, staff partners and funders. You need to be strong in the international market. Maybe I here should add that communication and branding issues turn out to be very sensitive. It was expected, but symbols, names, new names for every single department, and trying to promote the merged university as one was quite hard and diverted attention and resources somewhat. Steps were strengthened to strengthen the corporate AU brand, and we abolished several sub-brands. And we did establish a new set of controversial branding principles. It has since then, through the last project, the process I just described, been decided to loosen and change the approach to accommodate the critics that has been raised. Also, to the last point on the slide, merger costs are high and underestimated. Savings and quality follows much later. We also learned that where it is essential to reduce costs, change administrative procedures, etc., it is imperative to consult staff, students, and interested parties as they are the ones affected. Finally, potentially the largest cost for university mergers in terms of lost production, focus, and competitiveness. Yeah, next slide. Then, considering the lessons learned in terms of the process. Again, leadership is vital for formulating the vision, driving the process, overcoming obstacles, and negotiation. There need to be a necessary internal understanding and support of the decisions. And as you all know, the classical university spirit is very, very strong, built up over hundreds of years. So a respected, visionary, and capable rector is vital. And not to forget, in a university setting with leadership and management, supports in words and deed by all members of the senior management team and the next levels of leaders in the university. I'll not say any more there. Then also you need to have a shared vision with key stakeholders. You also need to have a governance and structures in place relatively early to take care of the transformation process. And you also need to have the necessary resources and human capital powers actually to support the process internally. And again, communication and dialogue is vital. It is a university. It is a challenging task. And it is actually easy for management of university or higher educational systems to forget the necessity of communication and dialogue. You need to dialogue with those most affected on a regular and a consistent basis. You need to focus on management expectations and keep them realistic. And you need to be out early before the event. And it's best if you can have two-way dialogue. And of course, you should be ready to confront the media, because the media will confront you after having talked to staff. Now, all this last two slides could be interpreted as I'm against mergers, it's expensive, it's impossible, it's difficult. No, not at all. It is lessons learned, and I think after the government decisions, there were no way back. It has been a very inspiring and challenging journey, and I'm sure in the case of Aarhus University, in spite of the costs, it's been worth it all. Aarhus University should now be in a position where we'll come out stronger and better prepared to strong international competition for talent and research funding. I have one more slide. I don't know how my time is, but I hope we will manage. So after this Danish story, let me turn to my very last slide, addressing the three important questions essential in the future design of our higher education system and universities. And the three questions are in the middle, and they are quite general, I know. And some of the previous speakers has filled them out nicely. First, and this is from a research perspective, how to support cutting-edge research that will lead to future groundbreaking research and scientific strongholds. We need to be excellent. We need to have the breakthrough research. Secondly, how to attract, retain, and develop the best and brightest young researchers, the issues of talent development. And this, I will add, it is not just the home group time I'm addressing. It is how to bring about competitive tenure tracks, requirements of key academic staff, and how to realize up and out schemes for mid-career faculty to enhance faculty dynamics in order to stay attractive for new generations of talented people. And finally, how to strengthen cooperation with business and society. In Europe, we are not there yet, and there are new models to be developed. In summary, that is getting the framework condition right, attracting the brightest talent, and supporting in cooperation and responding to societal needs. One of the lessons learned around the design of so far considered Danish higher educational system is it's all about balances. I think that's my main message. There is not one universal recipe to keep innovating to maintain our high level of scientific quality and impact. Some of the balances are illustrated on the slide. I know they are not all there. It's more complicated, but a few of them are there. Balances that also might change over time or even differ across countries and universities according to the mission, particularly profiles and missions. And most of them refer to the governance of the higher educational systems. Stepping again a bit back from the individual balancing acts on the slide, looking at the US, I find that among the determining factors for the enduring appeal of particularly the US as a scientific stronghold, I find the following few important characteristics of the US system or governance structure as decisive, namely openness to foreigners and language, appreciation of individual performance, concerns for young scientists and their early independence, competition-driven distribution of research fund, willingness to take risk, interdisciplinarity, at least at the most prestigious institutions in the US, the existing of large foundations or funds, and finally in the US, I guess, but I might be corrected by some of my colleagues, a broad consensus in scientific community about how to organize science and scientific excellence. Looking at Europe, I guess we are not quite there yet. We do have excellent universities and structures, but they are exceptions that only prove the rule. We still have fragmented structures at the member state level and at the EU level as well, with very many individual national research areas, each with its own funding agencies and government programs. I find it important that we both at the member state level as well as at the European level continue to strive for avoiding fragmentation and compartmentation as it reduces competition, prevent comparison, and restrict mobility, leading to lack of critical mass and considerable mediocrity. We do have the ERC effort through the JPRs and ERS nets, European Research Areas nets, and the public-private partnerships. And national funding agencies have taken many positive initiatives to coordinate initiatives to improve European quality and critical mass. And we are increasingly becoming more internationalized, seeing higher mobility among students and staff. That said, there is still a way to go in terms of consolidation, establishing strong common structures, internationalization, and establishing good governance structures and European collaboration. Compared to the US, we also have significant tasks in improving strong interdisciplinarity, competences, and way to foster cooperation between knowledge institutions, business, and society. In conclusions, or to summarize my presentation, first, the Danish case is an illustration of ambition and far-reaching reforms in terms of significant changes in the governance structure, in investments in research and education, consolidation and less fragmentation, both at the university level, but also among the funding institutions and mechanisms. Recently, also with the establishment of the Innovation Fund Denmark. However, having said that, result of these more recent and significant changes are to be seen in the future. Secondly, we should be concerned with these balances, including the balance between competition and cooperation, as quality of research are basic in research, as quality of any research area basically depend on the proper balance between the two. Competition to continue to strive for excellence, as competition exposes the true quality of individual researchers and research institutions within a research area, and thus promotes scientific excellence and cooperation being indispensable when it comes to addressing the grand challenges across disciplines, institutions, sectors, and borders. All aspects within a framework with academic freedom, well-defined autonomous governance structures, sufficient and well-structured research funding, and well-equipped facilities for teaching, research, knowledge exchange, and administration. Thank you very much.